This video is about all of Putin's presidential elections, and boy has he had many. Putin just got elected as president in Russia yet again. He came to power in 1999, which means that he is on track to beat Stalin as Russia's longest-serving leader in the past 200 years. In 1999, Putin was appointed as prime minister by Yeltsin, who was president at the time. And then Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned just a few months later, making Putin the acting president. And his first act as president would be to guarantee that the former president, Yeltsin, and his family were not prosecuted for anything, because there was an investigation to members of Yeltsin's family for bribery. And there was also a case that involved Putin himself as one of the suspects because he was part of the St. Petersburg government at the time. So Putin's first election was in 2000. The 2000 election was as close as Russia was going to get to a fair and free election. As fair as it could have been considering Putin's huge advantage in resources. He refused to participate in televised debates, he used state-run media to run ads against his opponents, and he used rides in military jets to bolster his image. And he was popular because of his tough response to Chechen terrorist attacks that later he was accused of orchestrating. So he gets elected to president and has a term of 4 years, and so in 2004 there's another election where he wins 72% of the vote. And again, lots of resources in favor of Putin. Then we have ballot stuffing and bias in the state-run media. Russia has several state-funded news channels. They gave him hours of positive coverage, while his opponents got a few minutes of negative or neutral coverage. In 2008, he was not allowed to run for president because at the time there were term limits, so a president could only serve 2 consecutive terms. So his prime minister, Medvedev, ran for president this time, and he won with 71% of the votes. And in his first campaign speech, he announced that he would appoint Putin as the prime minister if he won. Case called the election neither free nor fair. They are basically a watchdog organization in Europe that monitors elections. They're supposed to be an impartial observer. OSCE, another monitoring organization, refused to monitor the election because of severe restrictions imposed by the Russian government. And 3 out of the 9 members of Russia's Electoral Commission refused to sign protocols citing widespread falsification. And shortly after Medvedev took office in 2008, term limits were increased to 6 years. In 2011, Medvedev revealed that he was going to endorse Putin as the presidential candidate for the next election and that they had long ago made a deal to allow Putin to run for president in 2012. So this was like a public thing. They weren't hiding this. So Putin ran for president in 2012. Because as you remember, it's 2 consecutive terms, and then you can just run again if you skipped a term. He won with 63% of the vote. And there was widespread accusations of vote rigging and a wave of anti-Putin protests, one of the most notorious of which was the Pussy Riots protests, and then there was a subsequent trial. Let me know if you want me to make a video on that. 10 to 20,000 people protested in Moscow on May 6th. 80 people were injured, 450 were arrested that day, and 150 the next day. And it wasn't the last time that the Russian people's right to protest was curtailed by Putin. Next election was in 2018 because they had increased the term to 6 years. And once again, there were accusations of widespread electoral fraud, including ballot box stuffing, forced voting, and threats against election observers. There was a video that circulated online that showed people stuffing papers into ballot boxes. And then, of course, critics of Putin were just banned from running. Navalny was banned from running because of a trumped-up criminal conviction. According to one of the monitoring groups that were observing polling places that had been suspicious in previous elections, showed that the actual turnout at these polling places was something like 20 to 30%, but then the official results ended up being 70 to 80%. In one station, 8,765 physical voters were counted. Official results showed 13,235 votes. Statisticians estimated that 10 million votes had been added in favor of Putin. In July of 2020, Putin added amendments into the Russian constitution that allowed him to run for 2 more 6-year terms. And that brings us to the 2024 election where Putin shockingly won with 88% of the vote. Navalny was once again barred from running, and he died in prison in February. And the only specifically anti-war candidate, Nadezhdin, was also barred from running. And there were new rules. He saw a crow. And there were new rules added to the Russian constitution that said that presidential candidates had to have lived in Russia for 25 years, and they couldn't hold citizenship in any other country. That means I can't run for Russian president one day. Damn. An investigation by a coalition of journalists found that in February 2023, Putin issued a decree with the aim of coordinating between the Ministry of Education and Sciences and other state agencies to increase support for the main candidate, meaning himself. According to an article in Novaya Gazeta, a Russian newspaper, there was a statistical investigation that found that 22 million of the non-online votes in the 2024 election out of 67 million were falsified in favor of Putin. They described the analysis as record levels of fraud, even for a Russian election. There were also several instances of people setting fire to polling places in protest, including one lady who threw a Molotov cocktail at a polling station because she was apparently offered money to vote a certain way. And that's how Putin has stayed in power for 25 years.